I thought Caitlin's playmaking ability, really kind of got us going. We got into a nice rhythm in that second quarter and scored a lot of points. So.
Picture this: a player gets hurt mid-season, disappears from competitive basketball for 8 straight months, misses her team's entire playoff run, and the whole world wonders if she'll ever look the same again. Then she shows up to her first international tournament with Team USA, sits on the bench while veterans take the floor, and watches the starting unit stumble through an uninspiring opening stretch. But the second she checks into the game, everything changes. 17 points, 12 assists, 19 minutes. The second highest assist total in the history of FIBA Women's World Cup qualifying games. And she did all of that coming off the bench. The coach, who chose not to start her, then stood in front of international media and was forced to admit on camera that her team didn't find its rhythm until that player took the floor. This isn't just a story about one basketball game in Puerto Rico. This is about power, politics, ego, and what happens when an unstoppable force meets an institution desperately clinging to the way things used to be. The player is Caitlin Clark, and what unfolded during this tournament exposed something the establishment never wanted you to see. Before we get to the fireworks in San Juan, you need to understand what Caitlin Clark walked through just to be on that court. Her 2025 WNBA season was supposed to be the one where she silenced every remaining critic. After a Rookie of the Year campaign that averaged 11.6 points, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a video, and 6.4 assists per game, expectations for year 2 were through the roof. Then, disaster struck. On July 15th, Clark went down with a right groin injury during a game. The initial timeline seemed manageable, maybe a few weeks, but then came the bone bruise diagnosis. And just like that, her season was over after only 13 games. The Indiana Fever pushed into the playoffs without their franchise cornerstone, and Clark was left watching from the sideline, rehabbing in silence, while the basketball world moved on without her. For 8 months, nobody saw Caitlin Clark play a single competitive minute of basketball. 8 months of grueling physical therapy, strength rebuilding, and mental warfare against the doubt that creeps in when your body fails you at the worst possible moment. No preseason exhibitions, no tune-up games, nothing. Just the promise that when she returned, it would be on the biggest possible stage, representing Team USA at the FIBA Women's World Cup qualifying tournament in San Juan, Puerto Rico. The roster assembled for this qualifier was stacked. Head coach Kara Lawson brought together a fascinating mix of established veterans and explosive new talent. Chelsea Gray, the 4-time WNBA champion and 6-time All-Star, anchored the old guard. Kahleah Copper brought her signature two-way intensity. But this wasn't just a veteran showcase. The new generation had arrived in full force. Paige Buchers, Angel Reese, and Kiki Iriafen were all making their senior national team debuts alongside Clark. It felt like a passing of the torch moment for the entire program. And yet, despite all the buzz, despite Clark being the singular reason networks like TNT Sports purchased broadcast rights to these qualifying games, despite her being the most talked about player on the entire roster, Kara Lawson made a decision that sent shockwaves through the basketball world before the first game even tipped off. Clark would not start. The veterans would get the nod. The hierarchy would be respected. And what happened next would make every single person watching question whether that decision had anything to do with basketball at all. When the starting lineup was announced for Team USA's opener against Senegal, fans immediately noticed the absence. Caitlin Clark, the most marketable and arguably most talented player on the roster, was sitting on the bench. Chelsea Gray, the respected veteran, got the start at point guard. Now, there's always a reasonable argument for easing a player back in after a long injury layoff. Nobody disputes that. But what made this decision feel so politically charged was the pattern that followed. Clark didn't just come off the bench against Senegal. She came off the bench in multiple games throughout the tournament. Even after her historic performance in that opening contest, The coaching staff continued rotating her in and out of the starting five, as if they were still trying to figure out what they had. Against New Zealand, she finally got the nod, her first and only start of the qualifier. She responded with 14 points on 6 of 11 shooting and 6 assists. Clean, efficient, dominant. Then against Spain, the toughest opponent in the tournament and the game that mattered most, Lawson went right back to Chelsea Gray as the starting point guard. The media wasn't buying the explanation. Reporters pressed Lawson repeatedly about her rotation decisions, and her answers revealed more than she probably intended. "I'm still in fact-finding mode," she told reporters after the Senegal game. Fact-finding mode. Let that sit for a moment. This is the all-time leading scorer in NCAA basketball history, the reigning Rookie of the Year, a player who just produced a near-historic double-double in 19 minutes of action after missing 8 months. And the head coach of Team USA is standing at a podium telling the world she's still gathering information. Fans erupted online. Social media was flooded with clips of Lawson's press conference, dissecting every awkward pause and diplomatic dodge. The consensus was overwhelming. This wasn't about basketball evaluation. This was about protecting a hierarchy, sending a message to veterans that their status still mattered, that seniority still carried weight, that a 24-year-old, no matter how gifted, would have to wait her turn. But here's where the establishment's plan fell apart completely. Because you can bench a player, you can control minutes, you can manipulate starting lineups, but you absolutely cannot hide what happens when that player steps on the floor. And what Caitlin Clark did when she finally got her chance left no room for debate. The moment Caitlin Clark checked into the Senegal game, you could feel the energy shift through the screen. It wasn't subtle. It wasn't gradual. It was instant. Her first possession, she whipped a pass to Monique Billings for an easy layup. Within 3 minutes, she already had 4 assists. The offense, which had looked stagnant and directionless under the veteran starting unit, suddenly had a pulse. Passes were crisper, cuts were sharper. Players were moving with purpose because they knew the ball was going to find them in the exact right spot. By the time she was done, Clark had 17 points and 12 assists in just 19 minutes of play. That assist total was the second highest in the history of FIBA Women's World Cup qualifying games. Not for Team USA, for any player from any country ever. And she did it as a reserve, checking in cold after 8 months away from competitive basketball, still working her way back from a groin injury and bone bruise. But the most revealing part of the night wasn't the stat line, it was what Kara Lawson said afterward. Standing in front of cameras, the head coach told reporters that Clark's playmaking ability is what genuinely ignited the team's performance. She called her one of the most dynamic playmakers in the world. Then she went further. Imagine being a dynamic playmaker, and then all of a sudden, you're playing alongside all these other dynamic playmakers and finishers, Lawson said, her voice carrying a tone that sounded less like coaching analysis and more like someone who just witnessed something she couldn't fully explain. Think about the weight of that admission. The head coach of Team USA publicly acknowledged that the team couldn't find its offensive rhythm until Clark entered the game. She admitted that Clark's court vision, passing precision, and ability to read defenses at elite speed is what transformed the entire operation. This wasn't a reporter's opinion or a fan's bias. This came directly from the person who made the decision to bench her. And here's the uncomfortable truth buried inside Lawson's praise. If Clark is truly one of the most dynamic playmakers in the world, and the team only found its rhythm when she took the floor, then what exactly was the basketball justification for not starting her? That contradiction hung in the air like smoke. And it was about to get even harder to explain. Reporters at the press conference weren't going to let Lawson off easy. One of them asked a direct, beautifully simple question. Which combinations actually worked today? There was nowhere to hide. Magas? Lawson paused, then answered honestly. I kind of already mentioned that group in the second quarter. Caitlin, KP, Ryan, Monique, and Kiki. she named 5 specific players, and not a single one of them was in the starting lineup. Let that register. The head coach of Team USA publicly identified the best performing unit on the floor, and it was entirely composed of reserves led by a player she chose not to start. Caitlin Clark running point. Kelsey Plum spacing the floor as a lethal shooter. Rhyne Howard attacking lanes with explosive athleticism. Monique Billings finishing inside with physicality. And Kiki Iriafen providing size, energy, and versatility. This group didn't just play well. They changed the entire identity of Team USA's offense in real time. The style of play was completely different from what the veterans produced. The starting unit leaned into a slower, more methodical approach, the kind of half-court, post-oriented basketball that defined the old era of the WNBA. It was safe, it was predictable, and against Senegal, it was painfully ineffective. But when Clark's unit hit the floor, the pace skyrocketed. Ball movement became electric. The spacing opened up driving lanes that didn't exist before. Every player on the court became a legitimate scoring threat because defenses couldn't collapse on any single option without leaving someone else wide open. This is what happens when you pair a generational passer with athletes who can finish. Clark wasn't just scoring, she was making everyone around her dramatically better. Billings looked like a different player, catching Clark's feeds in the paint. Iriafen was getting easy looks she'd never see with a traditional point guard. Plum was running off screens into wide-open catch-and-shoot opportunities. The entire 5-player unit operated like they'd been playing together for years, not minutes. By naming that specific combination on camera, Lawson essentially told the world that the veteran starting lineup didn't execute the game plan. Whether she intended to or not, she drew a clear line between what worked and what didn't. And the basketball world heard it loud and clear. But one great quarter wouldn't be enough to prove this wasn't a fluke. Clark needed to sustain it across the entire tournament. And that's exactly what she did. Game after game, the pattern repeated itself. Clark would enter off the bench, and the offense would ignite. Against Puerto Rico, she orchestrated fast breaks that left defenders scrambling. Against Italy, her pull-up threes stretched defenses so wide that her teammates feasted on open looks inside. Every time she touched the floor, the scoreboard reflected it immediately. The United States went 5-0 in the tournament with a staggering 210-point differential across all 5 games. And while that dominance was a collective effort, there was no question who the engine was. When Lawson finally gave Clark a start against New Zealand, the result was exactly what everyone expected. 14 points on 6 of 11 shooting and 6 assists in a game that never felt competitive. Clark looked comfortable, controlled, and completely in command from the opening tip. It was the clearest evidence yet that starting her wasn't a risk, it was the obvious move. But then, against Spain, the toughest test of the qualifier, Lawson switched back to Chelsea Gray. The decision raised eyebrows across the basketball world. If Clark had earned the start through performance, why pull it back for the most important game? Rumors swirled online about internal dynamics, veteran influence on coaching decisions, and whether Lawson was navigating political pressure from established players who felt their roles were being threatened. None of that has been confirmed, and it's worth noting that coaching decisions at this level involve dozens of factors fans never see. But the optics were brutal, and the basketball spoke for itself. When the tournament ended, the awards committee made a statement that Lawson's rotations never could. Caitlin Clark was named the tournament's most valuable player. She was also selected to the All-Star 5 alongside her teammate Kelsey Plum. The player who started just 1 out of 5 games walked away with the highest individual honor of the entire competition. Think about how rare that is. MVPs are almost always starters. They're the players who log the most minutes, carry the heaviest workload, and anchor their team's identity from the jump. Clark did all of that in limited, inconsistent minutes, coming off an 8-month injury absence, while navigating a rotation system that seemed designed to minimize her role rather than maximize it. And while Clark was rewriting the record books in Puerto Rico, something equally seismic was happening back on the mainland. The entire financial structure of women's basketball was being torn apart and rebuilt from scratch. While Team USA was dominating in San Juan, the WNBA and its players' union were locked in one of the most intense labor battles in the history of women's professional sports. Negotiations over a new collective bargaining agreement had dragged on for months, and tensions were reaching a boiling point. Back in December, the players' union had taken a historic vote authorizing its executive committee to call a strike if necessary. The threat of losing the entire 2026 season was real. Fans were anxious, sponsors were nervous, and the league was facing a credibility crisis at the worst possible time. Reports suggest that over 100 hours of negotiations unfolded in Manhattan as both sides fought over revenue sharing, salary structures, travel accommodations, and player benefits. The old CBA had been built for a different era, one where the average player's salary hovered around $120,000 and the salary cap sat at just $1.5 million per team. Those numbers were a reflection of a league that had operated in relative obscurity for decades. But the landscape had shifted dramatically, driven in large part by the explosion of interest surrounding players like Clark, Reese, and Buchers. The verbal agreement that finally emerged just days after the qualifier ended represented a complete financial overhaul. The salary cap reportedly jumped from $1.5 million to $7 million per team. The Supermax contract ballooned from roughly $249,000 to $1.4 million. The average salary surged to approximately $600,000. These weren't incremental adjustments. This was a revolution in compensation that acknowledged the massive growth the league had experienced. And here's the moment that tied everything together. At the celebration following the deal, Caitlin Clark reportedly gave an emotional toast to the room, saying that what they'd just accomplished would change the lives of so many players. The same player the establishment had tried to contain on the court was now standing at the center of the financial transformation that would reshape the entire league. The old hierarchy wasn't just losing on the basketball court. It was dissolving everywhere, in boardrooms, in salary negotiations, in broadcast deals, and in the cultural conversation around women's sports. The guard wasn't just changing. It had already changed. And the only question left was whether the people in charge would finally stop pretending otherwise. The road ahead leads to Berlin. The FIBA Women's World Cup tips off September 4th, and Team USA will be chasing their 12th title against the best competition on the planet. The qualifying tournament gave Kara Lawson her only real window to experiment with lineups and rotations before the stakes become permanent. And what the data told her couldn't have been more clear. The team's best version, its fastest, most creative, most devastating offensive iteration runs through Caitlin Clark. She came back from an 8-month injury layoff and won tournament MVP off the bench. She recorded a historic double-double in 19 minutes. She made every single teammate around her better and forced the head coach to publicly name her unit as the best combination on the floor. The establishment tried to contain her with limited minutes, bench roles, and veteran-first hierarchies, and she answered by being so undeniably dominant that the conversation shifted permanently. So the question isn't whether Caitlin Clark belongs. That debate is officially dead. The real question is what happens when they finally stop holding her back and let her operate with zero restrictions on the world's biggest stage. Because if 19 minutes caused this much chaos, imagine what 40 would do. Stay locked in with my channel Simply Explained, your home for the truth behind the WNBA headlines.